This story happened when I was 10 years old. Yes, I was just a kid. My parents took me to a Burger King that had just opened on the outskirts of our town. It was Saturday night, and we celebrated my dad getting a new job. I remember I was excited, not because of my dad's career, but because he told me he would buy me a combo with a toy included. To tell you the truth, I liked McDonald's better, but do you think I would complain? The place was crowded, full of families and kids running around. My mom got us a table near a corner, while my dad went to the counter to order. As my dad placed the order, I looked at the toys for the combos and was disappointed not to find the one I liked. I told my dad to order it anyway, but we had no luck. My dad told me I had to be grateful and settle for the one that was there. Normally I would have, but there was something else. The brother of one of my friends works at McDonald's, and he told us that they always have extra toys in stock. They just don't feel like going to get them. Burger King couldn't be any different. If I found that toy, I could tell them I saw it, and they couldn't lie to me. While we waited for the food, I started looking around, looking for a way to get into the Burger King warehouse. As I was looking, I noticed something strange on the wall next to our table. There was a small door concealed behind a metal plate that looked like a maintenance access. No one else seemed to notice it, but I couldn't take my eyes off it. My parents were distracted, chatting and checking their phones, so I decided to approach. When I touched the panel, I noticed that it wasn't completely locked. It was as if someone had forgotten it like that. I pushed carefully and the door opened with a soft creak. What I saw behind it was not what I expected. The small door led into a dark, cold hallway. Even though I knew I shouldn't go, my curiosity was stronger. I had to find the storage room where the toys were kept. I entered without making a sound. The air smelled strange, like raw meat and something chemical. At the end of the corridor, there was another door, this time bigger, made of stainless steel. It had no handle, but it was ajar. I approached it, pushing it carefully. The room that was revealed was a huge industrial kitchen, completely different from the one seen from the counter. There were steel tables, shelves full of knives, and in the center, an open freezer. It wasn't dismembered meat or prepared for cooking. It was a whole horse, frozen, its eyes open in a vacant expression, its body covered in frost. My heart began to beat fast, and I froze for a few seconds. Suddenly, I heard footsteps. A man entered the room from a side door, carrying a huge blade in his hand. He walked straight towards the horse, inspecting it as if it were a simple piece of meat. My breathing quickened, and I inadvertently let out a small scream. The sound of my scream ricocheted around the room. The man turned sharply, his eyes meeting mine instantly. His face tightened into an expression of fury. It was another man, stockier, wearing a blood-stained apron. He grabbed my arm with a force that made me let out a groan of pain. "What are you doing here, Brett?" I tried to stammer out an excuse, but my voice wouldn't come out. The first man put the blade down on a table nearby and rushed over. The man was completely beside himself, furious. "You shouldn't have seen this." The second man lifted me effortlessly and laid me down on the table. The metal table was freezing cold and I couldn't breathe. Before I could move, the first man took the blade and brought it to my arm. "How about cooking him instead of the horse?" His words chilled my blood. I tried to move, but the man was holding me too strong.
"He's just a kid, Dave. You know he doesn't taste good."
"That doesn't matter. He's a nosy little boy. I want to eat him." The man leaned towards me, bringing the blade close to my face. I was sure I wouldn't get out of this alive. They were going to cut me into pieces and then eat me like that horse. They would surely make hamburger meat out of me.
"You're being too hard, Dave. You should give him another chance. Just this once."
All right. Listen, kid. If you tell anyone what you saw here with the horse, we'll come to your house. Understand? You keep this little secret for us and nothing happens.
Otherwise, we'll make hamburgers for you and your whole family. Understand?
My eyes filled with tears, but I nodded frantically. I couldn't think. I couldn't breathe. Everything in my body wanted to scream, but I knew that if I did, it would be worse. Dave let out a laugh and stepped back, dropping the blade on the table with a thud that echoed throughout the room. The other man reluctantly let go of me, pushing me to the floor. "Get the hell out of here, and remember what I told you." Dave pointed to the door with a curt gesture, and I didn't hesitate for a second. I ran as fast as I could back to my parents. I ran without looking back, my legs shaking so badly I almost fell over. When I got back to the table where my parents were, the words came rushing out. I told them everything, but my dad just frowned and my mom rolled her eyes. "Stop making stuff up, Henry. Today's a big day for your dad." "It's not funny, Henry. If this is about the toy, I'll get you another one." I tried to insist, but an employee who was cleaning up nearby chuckled. "You've got quite an imagination, kid. Maybe you should write a book." I noticed an angry look on the man's face. He knew I was telling the truth, and by his menacing look, he wanted me to shut my mouth. As for my parents, I couldn't understand how they could ignore me. I was shaking with tears running down my face, but no one believed me. My mom scolded me for making a scene, and my dad told me to calm down. I couldn't. Not after what I had seen. While they were eating, I looked up and saw the same employee who had made fun of me. He was staring at me from the counter, his face expressionless, but he raised an index finger to his lips, signaling me to shut up. My heart skipped a beat. I couldn't stand still. I knew I had to do something to make my parents believe me. I stood up immediately and ran to the door that led to the kitchen. My mom yelled my name, but I didn't care. I had to show them what I had seen. When I got there, the door was locked. I knocked with all my might, but it wouldn't open. An employee opened it from inside, looking at me curiously. It was an older man with a friendly smile. "What's the matter, little boy? Have you escaped?" Behind him, the kitchen looked normal, clean and tidy like any restaurant kitchen. At that moment, I understood one thing. They expected me to do this. They had cleaned it. My parents came running after me, apologizing to the man. I tried to explain, but the kitchen was spotless. The cooks I saw earlier were gone. Everything was normal as if nothing had happened. We left the restaurant and my parents kept scolding me in the car. My mom said I was grounded and my dad threatened to take away my video games. They didn't care that I was crying. They didn't understand that I hadn't made anything up. As the car drove away, I looked out the window. In front of the Burger King, two men were standing. One of them was Dave, and the other was his partner. Both were staring at our car, and Dave smiled slightly, raising a hand in farewell. I sank into my seat, my stomach churning. Growing up, I understood that neither of those two men really wanted to hurt me. They just wanted to scare the hell out of me. They wanted to scare me so much that I wouldn't talk, and in case I did talk, I would tell a story so far-fetched that they wouldn't believe me. And it worked. To this day, my parents still believe it was all my imagination when I was little. Eventually, I stopped trying so hard to make them believe me, but I never went to Burger King again. I don't know if it still happens today, but back then, I'm sure people ate horse meat.
It started out as a normal night. My dad had decided that we should go out to dinner because my brother had finished another year of school and I had just been accepted to college. I'll be honest, Burger King wasn't my first choice, but hey, when you're the older sister and you consider yourself an adult, you give some things up. Josh, my younger brother, was happy. For him, a burger was the solution to all problems. My mom was quiet, though distracted by her cell phone. We arrived at the restaurant around 8 o'clock. The breeze from the air conditioning hit us as we entered, which we liked very much. No matter how hot it was at night, it was so hot outside that it was sweltering. When we walked in, I noticed that the place was almost empty, with only a couple of families and a group of young friends occupying tables in the corner. We chose a table by the window while my dad and I went to order food. Everything was going well until I saw him behind the counter. Darren, my ex. He was wearing a Burger King uniform with a ridiculous hat that barely covered his messy hair. His expression was kind, almost goofy, like he was the kind of guy who would never hurt anyone. But I knew the truth. The reason I left Darren was because he was such a bad person. He was one of those people who are physically small and people think are harmless. I thought so too, but after a while of dating him, I realized he was a monster. Physical violence may not have been his thing, but behind that coy smile was a manipulative, venomous, vengeful, and violent man. I avoided looking him in the eye as I asked, but he recognized me instantly and spoke to me as if absolutely nothing had happened between us. "Hello, Alice. You look well." His tone was casual and friendly, even a little apologetic. This same nice little man locked me inside his house and threw away the key the day I left him after I found out he was stalking all my male friends on social media. That day I had to escape through the window and run, while he threatened to hack my whole family's bank account. I wanted to tell him everything. How dare he talk to me as if nothing had happened? But I knew his game. If I got angry, I would be the villain and he would only be pitiful. I ignored him and finished the order as quickly as possible. When I returned to the table with the tray, my heart was beating faster than I wanted to admit. He hadn't said anything strange, but the thought of having to see him again made me nervous. You don't want to attract the attention of this psycho. As we ate, Darren passed by our table several times, always with a smile that seemed a little wider than necessary. My mom was too busy on her phone to notice anything, and my dad was focused on his burger. Darren was constantly looking at me, but there was something about his face. He wasn't just trying to be cute. There was some anticipation on his face. He was waiting for something. That only encouraged me to eat faster. I wanted to go. I had only taken a couple of bites when I felt something weird. A crunching sound. It was a sound that had no place in a hamburger. Instinctively, I opened up the bun, and there I saw what I saw. The hamburger. In the burger were parts of cockroaches squashed between the cheese and the meat. Their thin, fragmented legs were stuck to the sauce and a dark liquid was dripping from the remains. My throat closed up and I dropped the burger on the tray. I fell to the floor and had the urge to vomit, but I got so nervous that I didn't. "Dad!" My dad looked up and saw what was on my tray. His expression went from disgust to anger in a matter of seconds. "What the hell is this?" He grabbed the burger and headed for the counter, leaving my mom and Josh confused. I watched my dad face the employees holding up the burger as if it were evidence of a crime. The employees looked puzzled, but Darren appeared from the kitchen with a perfectly rehearsed expression of confusion. "I'm so sorry. I don't know how this could happen. Let me get the manager." But I knew he wasn't looking for anyone. Darren disappeared through the kitchen door, and a shiver ran down my spine. As soon as I could recover a little and my throat opened up, I screamed. "They say a manager is coming to talk to us." "We'll make a fuss. There's no way we're going to let them get past this. Are you okay, Alice?" "No. This was on purpose. That employee is Darren." "Darren? Your ex?" That's when Darren reappeared, and everything changed. Darren wasn't bringing the manager. Instead, he had the burger in his hand. His face was no longer that of someone friendly. There was something deeply disturbing about his smile. Without warning, he jumped over the counter and headed straight for me. My legs seemed to freeze in place as he crossed the restaurant with long, quick strides. Before I could react, Darren was in front of me. His hand gripped my arm with mammoth force as he pressed the burger against my face. The smell was the first thing that hit me. It was nauseating, a mixture of rotting meat, rotting eggs, and something chemical. As the burger touched my lips, I felt the cockroach's legs against my skin. I tried to pull away, but Darren was much stronger. His free hand grabbed my jaw, forcing my mouth open as the burger crumbled, spreading a sticky substance across my face. The bun was falling apart, mixed with that goo I couldn't identify. Some of it slid onto my tongue, and the metallic taste made me gag almost instantly. Darren pressed harder, laughing quietly as he forced fragments of the burger down my throat. I felt more than just the cockroaches. There were chunks of something soft like bad meat and a salty liquid that tasted like sweat. My whole body was struggling to break free, but Darren wouldn't budge. I tried to scream, but the sound was drowned out as more pieces of the burger went into my mouth. I thought it had been minutes since Darren lunged at me. I didn't understand why no one did anything, but that's when reality hit me. All of this happened in only 2 or 3 seconds at the most. It took my dad a while to react out of confusion, but he finally did. My dad grabbed him by the shirt and pushed him backward. Darren fell, but the hamburger was still in his hand. Darren stood up quickly, his eyes wild. The entire restaurant was in chaos. Customers were screaming, and some employees were trying to intervene. Darren stood at attention to attack my dad, and that's when I realized something my dad didn't. Darren had a knife in his hand. Darren had a knife. "Dad, he's got a knife!" Before my dad could react, my ex-boyfriend lunged at him to attack him, but in a desperate attempt, a burly employee appeared from behind and hit Darren hard, knocking him unconscious, with the burger crushed in his hand. The police arrived shortly thereafter. They took Darren away in handcuffs. He was crying and apologizing to me, apologizing to my father and to everyone nearby. He said he didn't know what happened to him. I didn't believe a word he said. That was the last time I ate a hamburger. Today, every time I think about it, I feel the taste and texture of that hamburger in my mouth, the cockroach legs brushing my lips, the smell of decay. I just lost my appetite. As for Darren, he has a restraining order. I don't know why I didn't do it at the time, although I really don't know how much it would help me to have it. The best I can do is stay away from that psycho, and if I see him, leave while I pray he doesn't see me.
How many of you believe in demonic possession? I would say many of you enjoy watching those horror movies, but in real life, hardly anyone believes in things like demonic spirits or ghosts until they experience it firsthand. Being a horror freak, I did not miss a single horror movie. You name it, I must have seen it at some point. But like traumatic endings of some horror movies, my life too did not go as I planned, and I ended up working in the Burger King. My job was not even flipping the patties or taking the orders. Nope, I worked as a cleaner. I made sure the Burger King outlet was clean first thing in the morning and last thing in the evening. I mostly worked throughout the day picking up trash and trays left by people on the tables. I wiped the floors whenever necessary and washed the dishes whenever necessary. Every day, hundreds of people visit Burger King. But we have a nurse that works in a hospital opposite to us. She comes here for lunch every afternoon. And with her is her little daughter, Maria. Both of them come here almost every day. The majority of the staff members know these two and their orders by heart. Little Maria won't be more than 5. She is a special child, as she has mild autism and needs some medical care. Good for the little girl, her mother is a nurse. So every morning, Mary brings her daughter to the hospital with her for therapy, and every afternoon, they come here to grab a bite. Then she drives little Maria to her grandparents and returns to work. Never before this had I dealt with an autistic child. But Maria is pretty sweet and is friends with most of the staff. So she is not scared of us. But to comfort herself, she carries a little rag doll with her everywhere. They say it's to make her feel comfortable. The rag doll makes her feel grounded and safe in some ways, says her mom. Hell, what do I know? If the doll makes the kid happy, so be it. But now Mary is going to be 6 and most probably go to school. So her doctor and therapist thought that it's time she lets go of the toy. So for the last few weeks, they have been working on separating the doll from the child. So far, no success. She had the doll since she was born. It was gifted to her by her late grandmother, and by the condition of the doll, you could say that it has seen better days. Although the doctors are patient with the kid, Mary is not. She thought it would be best if she took the doll away from her daughter once and for all. Sure, she would cry and throw a hissy fit, but Mary was ready to handle it. Mary thought that Maria would get bullied in school if she carried a doll everywhere with her. Nonetheless, a very beaten-up old doll. So the day Mary planned to do this, she brought Maria to our Burger King and ordered some extra food, especially the items Maria liked. Mary had planned to leave the doll behind in the Burger King and pretend that they had lost the doll, so it would hurt Maria less. She had spoken to a few of the staff members about her plan, and we were all going to help Mary distract Maria. I was entrusted with the job of slowly sneaking off with the doll while Maria was busy eating. I had to make sure Maria does not notice me, or, worse, catch me in the act. The day comes when we have to execute the plan. Little Maria enters the Burger King with her mother, and she looked tired from her daily therapy. One of her hands was holding her mother's, and the other clutching the damn doll. They sit at their regular table, and the waitress brings their food, the extra cheese fries, and milkshake on its way. Maria is happy to see that her mom is treating her with all her favorite food items. She momentarily forgets her doll, and that's when I go to their table, pretending to take their empty trays, and I pick up the doll too. Maria was so focused on her food that she did not notice her precious toy missing. But before I could discreetly return the doll to Mary, she got a phone call from the hospital, and she left in a rush, almost dragging little Maria behind her. The poor girl just grabbed her milkshakes and walked away with her mother. No thoughts about the doll. I guess that I was left taking care of the doll for the night. The next day when Maria and Mary would come, I had planned to return the doll to the girl's mother. In the meantime, I decided to keep the doll in the supply closet with all my cleaning stuff. The doll was so dirty that it fit right in there. I continued my shift and paid little attention to the doll. At around 10:30, when all the staff left and I was left with the responsibility to clean the restaurant and lock it up, I walked to the supply closet and opened it to grab my cleaning supplies. But surprisingly, the doll wasn't there. I searched through the closet and found it had fallen at the bottom. Instead of locking up the doll again, I decided to place it on a table and start working. I often clean the kitchen area first as it gets dirtier. Once I finish cleaning one area, I switch off the light and move to the next. I had placed the doll on a table close to the kitchen area, and once I was done cleaning it, I switched off the light, plunging the table into darkness. I continued cleaning, whistling to myself. That's when I see a moment through the corner of my eye. I instantly turn towards the table with the doll and freeze mid-cleaning. The doll was no longer laying flat on the table, but was standing and bent in a weird position. However, what scared me the most were the glowing red, orangish eyes that seemed to pierce through my soul. Next thing I know, the doll's head twists backward, and it's all like it's a horror movie. Instead of being a brave person, I just dropped my supplies and ran home. I did not even bother to lock the Burger King. The next morning when I reached the restaurant, the manager is already at my throat for being so careless and leaving the restaurant open. I explained to him what had happened, and he threw the rag doll, which was still on the table, at my face and fired me on the spot. But I knew that something was very wrong with the doll, and now I'm sitting on the sidewalk waiting for Mary with the doll in my hand and without a job. Now that I look at it, its button eyes and old frilly clothes are the same as they were before. No sign of any demonic possession. So is the doll really possessed, or is there a problem with my head? Hi guys, my name is Alex, and believe it or not, I was one of the famous Burger King employees who worked in one of the most infamous Burger King branches. The brand that, although no one ever knew it, mistreated its employees the most. It all started when our old manager, who we'll call Jerry, was fired. We had a great time with Jerry. We were so relaxed, and he was so undemanding, we could hardly consider it a job. Yes, customers sometimes complained that we were late in shipping orders, but most of them left happy because they knew we made the food with a lot of love and effort. The bosses were not happy about this because they fired Jerry. At first, we all wondered if one of us would be the next manager. But since they felt that because of Jerry, we were all pretty lazy, they decided to look for someone from the outside. That's when Jean showed up, and that was the beginning of the end of our relaxing days and the beginning of a nightmare that seemed like it would never end. You see, Jean was obsessed with time. The man was always seen with at least 3 watches, always looking at them. Burger King executives loved this quality about him, because whatever franchise he touched, that franchise radically improved his numbers. They were so obsessed with his accomplishments, no one stopped to think about how he did them. In the beginning, Gene was constantly rushing us. He didn't want us to rest for a second. The moment a customer arrived, we all had to soldier on and not let him wait 5 minutes. He couldn't stand us preparing the food on the spot. All the food had to be previously prepared, and assembled according to the client to deliver it much faster. It was hell. Every time one of us would relax, Gene would appear from behind and yell wildly at him to get to work. It was as if he were everywhere at once, as if he had eyes on us all the time. In the first few weeks, he pushed us to the limit. Most of us thought for sure he was going to calm down, that he was probably trying to make a good impression, and that he didn't want to give up in these first few days that he was still new. But needless to say, we were wrong. As time went by, Gene became more and more demanding. He got to the point of standing next to us and timing how long we could make a burger. Many of us complained about him at the end of working hours, but no one ever dared to confront him. Not because he was our boss, but because he was terrifying. The man had a dark presence, and he looked at us with such hatred, with such disdain, that we felt that if we said anything to him, he would probably rip our heads off. As time went on, Gene's rules became more and more illogical. Once a week, he would force us to flip burgers next to him. If we took more than 20 seconds, we were financially penalized and part of our salary was taken away. Naturally, some of us started to quit. And this is where the really scary part began. Every time someone quit, Gene would get frantic. That day, you couldn't even look at him or he would scream at you with all his fury. The next day, Gene would go to work, and the day after, he would come in a very strange mood, as if something had happened the day he was absent. We tried to communicate with the guys who quit, but we could not. It was as if the people and their families disappeared off the face of the earth. We couldn't confirm it and we had no proof, but we knew Gene had something to do with it. Meanwhile, back at the shop, everything started to get worse. The time to make a hamburger was getting shorter and shorter. The only day we saw Gene happy was when a coworker managed to do it in 8 seconds. But that only made him even angrier at those of us who didn't make it. In the beginning, people were happy because the food was coming fast, but then the complaints started. We were making the food so fast that we forgot to put in ingredients or did it wrong. Every time this happened, Gene would wait until after work hours to yell at us and hit us. We were all too afraid to say anything to him or to quit. We were sure that something terrible would happen to us if we fought back. And not doing so, not standing up for ourselves, would make it all end in the worst of ways. I remember on the worst day of all, Gene met me outside work. He told us that this would be his last diamond, so he wanted to make sure the staff was prepared. We all smiled and thought that if we would never see him again after this, we would put up with anything. None of us imagined what Gene had prepared for us. Out of nowhere, the maniac pulled out a revolver and pointed it at all of us, who fell back in fear, raising our hands in the air.
You see, guys, I can't allow any fishing personnel to remain on my last day, so that's the way it's going to be. My shift ends at 9 p.m. You have 15 minutes to flip burgers without stopping. Whoever takes longer than 12 seconds will be fired.
Quickly, he pointed the gun at us and made us pass one by one to make hamburgers. Meanwhile, he pointed the guns at our heads, insulted us, and even slapped us in the face. In the beginning, we all managed to do it in less than 12 seconds. But before it was my turn, one guy took a second too long. Please, no! Without saying anything to him, Gene simply pulled the trigger and blew his head off.
No cleaning the corpse. The rest will work here, in the blood and with her boyfriend by her side. Next.
And after that, we all kept making burgers. The condiments were full of blood, but that didn't matter. That couldn't matter, because if we made them wrong, we would end up being another corpse. At that moment, we had to reveal ourselves. We should have all jumped against him, but can you blame us? We were just a bunch of scared teenagers. We just wanted to go home. Little by little, my companions began to fall and die. It was getting harder and harder to make hamburgers. The smell of blood was too much. Some of them started to vomit, but they couldn't even afford that, as Gene threatened to kill them if they took too long. When it was my turn again, I tried to go make the hamburger, but something was happening to me. My legs, they weren't working. I wanted to move and I wanted to make the burger, but I just couldn't walk. Furious, Gene came up to me and grabbed me by the hair, putting my head on the counter full of blood
and rubbing it as if it were a rag. "Is that why you can't move, Alex? You better get used to the blood, because if you don't make that hamburger, yours will be here too. You understand?" Gathering all my energy, my body started working again, and I could answer him. "Yes, sir." I started to make the hamburger as fast as possible, but it was very difficult. My hands were shaking. I felt like I was doing everything wrong, as if I was putting all the ingredients in automatic mode. I couldn't concentrate on my work. I just cried and begged to see my family one more time. Meanwhile, I felt the cold tube of Gene's gun on my head, squeezing me with disdain, as if he couldn't stand the urge to blow my head off in front of everyone. As soon as I finished the hamburger, Gene stopped the stopwatch and with a huge smile, showed it to me. The stopwatch read 12 seconds. I had made it. "Well, guys, it's 9 p.m. It was a pleasure working with you. I know I'm leaving the place with capable people." After saying these words, Gene put the gun to his head and simply pulled the trigger. He fell dead instantly. After something so cruel and sadistic, you can imagine that this was news all over the world, right? Well, it wasn't. Burger King put up a huge amount of money so that this story would never become known. The victims' families were bribed and threatened. No one made a fuss. Burger King was too powerful, and everyone knew they were going to lose. My other coworkers and I quit immediately after that, and we even didn't give them time to look for replacements. Sometimes I walk by the restaurant and see that it's open again, with kids like us, having fun. When I sit down to eat, I never again get nervous about how long the food will take. I appreciate that they take their time, because every time food comes quickly, I am reminded of the stacked corpses of my coworkers and how close I came to being one of them.